Greetings, my name is Dylan Torres, and this is my speech. It was the year 2020, and as spring break approximated, many of us started to hear about an epidemic that was taking over the world. We saw it take over Asia, then over Europe, and then it consequently reached our country, state, and our beloved city of El Paso. I am, of course, referring to the COVID-19, or how it is known by many, the coronavirus. This resulted in a quarantine that brought with itself many bizarre experiences, such as a war for toilet paper, watching our favorite TV host deliver a monologue through Skype, and worst of all to me, the cancellation of sports. And as people grow tired of staying home and the period of federally enforced mitigation ends, many states around the country are devising plans to opening up their economical sources and going back to their normal lives, or what's left of it. Which leads me to talk about the state and our city of El Paso and why it is not a good idea to open back up and end our period of quarantine just yet. Now you might be asking, why in the world should we continue with this misery? And to an extent, I agree. This period has resulted in never before seen rates of unemployment, mental health issues like depression and anxiety attacks, in which I unfortunately include myself, and excessive amounts of homework from university professors and teachers. And well, just a general sense of boredom that has been shared collectively by our society. And well, the answer is simple. As a state and city, we're not yet ready or competent enough to go back to how we were living before this quarantine began. Now, there's a lot to be said about the competence of our governor, Greg Abbott. But in not trying to get political, I would just like to highlight the lack of obedience that Governor Abbott has had in regards to the CDC's guidelines. According to the CDC's Opening Up America's guidelines, a period of 14 days of downward trajectory of positive infected cases would be the first step necessary to open the state back up. And unfortunately, as they stand today, our statistics tell a very different story. Texas has been growing in reported cases since it was first reached by the disease, with approximately 35,390 cases, and experts still estimate that a peak has yet to be reached. The same could be said for our city of El Paso, as it too has seen continuous growth in cases, with current reports of 1,276 positive cases and 32 deaths, which is 10 more than 2 days ago. If we compare the trajectory that is suggested by the CDC's guidelines and our current trajectory, we can see that the difference is pretty clear. Dr. Anthony Fauci, who is one of the main figures in handling this pandemic in the country, and also one of the main figures in devising the guidelines to open back up, was questioned about or asked by a news source about the consequences of opening up early and without taking the proper precautions, to which he responded that he hoped that leaders all around the country would listen to his advice, as a decrease of mitigation inevitably leads to a rebound in number of infected cases and a rebound in number of deaths per week or per day, and that he hoped that leaders would be able to handle this hypothetical scenario. Of course, all Dr. Fauci can do for now is actually just hope, as the period is not federally enforced anymore and he can't do anything about it. And all we can do now is look at Governor Abbott continue to ignore the CDC's guidelines and override our local officials' laws, as he stated that he would do if it was necessary. And well, now let's say that Governor Greg Abbott has an actual plan to open up the state that is viable and that won't result in more casualties, or not casualties, but let's just say how it is, deaths. Well, how would this plan look? Well, to put it mildly, the state and the city would need to increase the rates of testing that have been done per day. It is crazy to think that most of the period of quarantine could have been avoided by this country if the country had been ready with a sufficient supply of tests, but it wasn't. The Atlantic Daily newspaper claims that not deploying enough tests during the early stages of the spread was a single flaw that undermined every other countermeasure in the United States. So yeah, testing is pretty important, and testing matters. There are signs that our state and city are not currently yet ready with the necessary amounts of testing devices that we would need, as it has been ranked the lowest positions of all of the United States in terms of state, and it is just currently tested over 1% of the population in the state. It is difficult to point at the appropriate number of rates of testing that should be done per day, that the state should carry, but according to the Harvard Global Health Institute, a state with the population in Texas should be practicing about 4,500 tests daily. We can also look overseas for great examples of countries that have been successful in opening up, such as the case of South Korea. South Korea had encountered a different type of coronavirus previously. Therefore, it had significant experience in dealing with the consequences that a pandemic like this may bring. And so it was a bit more ready to handle this. To compare the United States and South Korea's aggressive testing, the U.S. had tested about 472 people during its first month of encountering the coronavirus. South Korea had tested about 55,000 people by the same date. Our ally also developed effective tactics to tackle the spread of the virus, like tracking the people that had been infected to alert the public of places that have been infected by individuals that visited those places, which is technology that is currently absent in our state and our city. It was a combination of both aggressive testing and tracing that allowed South Korea to go back and function like its old self in a relatively short amount of time, which is not something that can be said about our city and state. No matter how much people dislike to stay at home and dislike to be bored. Therefore, our best solution to this problem and to slow the spread of this disease would be to not listen to, unfortunately, our leaders or politicians, and to not really trust that the state is ready to open back up. Therefore, our best solution to stop this would be to continue to follow the CDC's guidelines that were being federally enforced as before, and continue to stay home if it's not demanded by a situation to go out, and demanded by a very important situation by that. Now, leaving home may seem brave, but it affects the most vulnerable people of your home. Therefore, it is in the best interest of our community to continue to mitigate the spread of this disease. And yes, unfortunately, the American economy has seen some of its worst days until now. However, it can be saved. Saved by the million of American lives that can be saved with the easy but great act of staying home. Now that's something truly patriotic. My name is Dylan Torres. Thank you.